Hey everyone, this is Mike in Peoria, and today we're going to talk about my obsession with Apple computers. Hey everyone, this is Mike in Peoria. I realize that I've done 7 videos, I think, so far, not including this one, and I really haven't given you much information about me or my channel. As a little background, I'm Mike and I live in Peoria, Illinois. I retired after 36 years with the same big company earlier this year in March. I loved my job, I had a great career there. But now I have time to do the things that I want to do, and that includes several things, and I'm documenting a lot of that on this channel. I'm interested in history, particularly the history of my hometown, Kewanee, Illinois, and some of the videos on my channel are related to that. And just as an example, there's an old poster advertising the 1945 Kewanee High football schedule. I'm interested in photography, woodworking. I've got a couple of those kind of videos on the site so far. And tech gadgets of all kind, photography as well. What I'm going to talk about today is my current collection of Apple Macintosh computers. I've been into computers for a really long time, since 1979 when I bought my first computer, a Radio Shack TRS-80 Model 1, Level 1, 4K of memory, not megabytes, not gigabytes, 4 kilobytes. No hard drive, no floppy drive. You had to store programs and data on cassette tape recorders that you plugged into the computer. So I've been into computers. I've had a whole bunch of different kinds. And for the first 20 years in the hobby, as it were, I didn't have any Macs. I bought my first Mac in 1999. And I'll go into that in a little bit. Over my history of buying Macs, I bought about close to 40 Macs, I think. 3 of them, and I'll show you those in a minute, I bought used, old as collector's items. I didn't buy new. Sort of roughly 35 of the Macs that I've had, I bought new with the intention that either I use them, one of my 2 kids, or my wife used them. Overall, I used probably 25 of them, and my wife and kids used maybe 10. Of the 35 odd computers, Apple Macs that I bought, I still have 13. And I'll take you through a run-through of the 13 that I still have today. And I'll start with the 3 Macs that I use. I was going to say daily, but I don't necessarily use every one daily, particularly the 2 laptops here. The first I'll show you is the little 12-inch MacBook Retina. It's a great little computer. Very nice screen, very lightweight, compact. The keyboard's not too bad to type on. The trackpad's pretty decent. The downside of this computer, like many of the new Mac laptops, is all that it has for jacks is this one USB-C port. I mostly use this computer when I'm on the move somewhere. I want to be able to maybe edit a spreadsheet, write a document, that kind of thing. Nothing too heavy, nothing too processor intensive. I'm not editing videos on this thing. I don't use it too much anymore. I bought it a couple of years ago when I was still working and traveling a fair bit. But I like it. It's a good little laptop. That's the MacBook. This is the latest generation MacBook Pro. This is the 15-inch model, the 2017 version with the touch bar. I really like this laptop. It's got a fabulous, bright, crisp as you can imagine screen. The trackpad is big and very good, and the keyboard is just fine. I use this computer a fair bit. Even though I'm retired, I'm on the board of a couple of companies, and I help out at a couple of nonprofits. And one of the nonprofits in particular, I do a fair bit of work on the computer. And so when I go in there, I take this, and I use it actually mostly for work on that nonprofit. I can't bring the desktop in here. I have one of the trash can Mac Pros, and I'll show you a couple pictures of that. Here's a picture of my Mac desktop setup. It's in my my home office. You can just barely see the computer underneath the left-hand side of the monitor in this shot. It's a 6-core trash can Mac Pro. It's the computer I use to edit video. I keep my photo libraries on it. I use it to stream music in my office. It's a great all-around computer. I have 2 external hard drives connected to it, one for photos and video, and the other is a backup for the whole system. I stayed up until 2 a.m. Central Time, which was midnight Pacific Time, on the night in December of 2013 that Apple released these things so I could get my order in. So I was one of the first to have one of these Mac Pros, and I actually love the thing. It's super quiet, super fast, does a great job with Final Cut Pro and Lightroom. And it's not very big. You can just see it here in this picture. You got to look for it though. It's the round sort of dark gray cylinder on the right behind the monitor. Here's a look at the 3 oldest Macs that I own, and I didn't buy any of them new. I bought them as kind of collector's items. The one on the right here is the Mac Classic 2, and that was made in 1992. And like earlier Macs, it has a 9-inch monochrome screen. The form factor is a little bit sleeker than the original Mac, and it came with 2 megabytes of RAM and a 40 megabyte hard drive. I didn't actually buy that one. It was given to me by a friend who did buy it new, and he hung on to it for 20 years before passing it on to me. This Mac in the middle is a Macintosh Plus from 1988. I bought this one on eBay about 10 years ago for $50. It sold for about $2,700 when it was new 30 years ago. It had 1 meg of memory, and it was expandable to 4 meg. And it had an 800K double-sided floppy drive. It didn't have an internal hard drive, but you could connect an external 20 megabyte hard drive to it. Now, the Mac on the left is kind of my pride and joy of the old Macs. It's what was called a Fat Mac, Mac 512K. About 6 months after they came out with the original Mac, which had 128K, they released a slightly updated version. About the only thing that was different is that it had a little more memory. Again, 512K. And I bought that on eBay also about 10 years ago, and it works great. Now, when it came out in 1984, the Mac was a fairly small form factor, at least compared to everything else at the time. And Apple kind of considered it to be portable, and you could buy this cool canvas zip-up bag from Apple to drop your Mac in. The keyboard slid alongside, along with the cords and the mouse, and you were off. These are 2 of the kind of original form factor iMacs. The one on the left is the very first Mac I bought. I got it in 1999. We were living in England at the time. I'd never had a Mac before, and frankly, I thought Apple might be going under. Steve Jobs had not long before come back to the company. It was in a little bit of financial trouble, and I thought it would be an interesting project. Learn the Mac OS, and if it did go under, maybe it would be a collector's item. The Mac on the right is similar. It's a year or 2 newer. And we got that from my daughter. She used it. It's an iMac DV. So you can see underneath the screen, it has that blue bar. That was a DVD player. The original iMac to the left just had a CD player. This is the iMac G4. It was a kind of an odd looking machine, but an interesting concept. The screen floated on like a spring loaded arm above the sort of half circle base there. This was the 17-inch model. They came in 15, 17, and 20 inches. I didn't use it for very long. I passed it on to my daughter shortly after I got it because I really wanted a bigger screen, and she used it for a few years. This is the first of 3 Mac Minis I've owned. This is a 2005 model, an original, a 1.25 gigahertz G4 PowerPC. That was before Apple moved to Intel. I used this at work. I updated it a couple years later when they came out with the Intel models. And that computer is still in use today, believe it or not, 10 years later at the Kiwani Historical Society. The third Mini that I bought in 2012. I had a Mac Pro at the time, but it was very old and not fast enough, and I needed something updated. But you know, there was no sense in buying a new Mac Pro because there was nothing new on the horizon. So I bought the Mini to kind of tide me over. I have since passed that on to a relative. Okay, these are 2 of my big desktop computers. The one on the left I bought, I think it was in mid-2003. It is a PowerMac G5, and I was very excited when these things came out. I can remember on the day or shortly after they were released, calling the Apple Store in Chicago on Michigan Avenue to see if they had one in stock, and they did. And I made about a 7-hour round trip from Peoria to Chicago, parked the car, got in, got the thing, bought it with the 23-inch cinema display, and brought it home. It was a great computer, and I used that until the Intel Macs came out in 2006. I had another one that looked like these two that was in between it, but I've given that away. I passed it on to a friend of the family. The one on the right is the Mac Pro that I bought in 2000 and late 2012, I think it was. I had gotten the Mini, and I didn't really like using the Mini, so I bit the bullet, and I went ahead and got another Mac Pro. And I actually didn't use this one for very long at home. The Trash Can Mac came out about a year later, maybe a year and a half. And so when I got the Trash Can Mac Pro at home, I took that one to work for a while. Okay, now on to the laptops. These are 2 of the Apple G4 titanium laptops. I had an earlier Apple laptop, the Pismo G3. I think that was in 1999 or 2000. That was my first Apple laptop, and it was okay, but these things were just awesome. The one on the left is the original. It had a G4 processor. It was, compared to anything else that was out on the market at the time, it was thin and super cool. It wasn't one of those sort of black boxes. We were living in England at the time, and on a business trip back to the U.S., I bought one and took it back with me. After we moved back to the U.S., about a year later, year and a half later maybe, the one on the right is an updated version, very, very similar, about the same, a little bit higher resolution on the screen, and a faster G4 processor. But you know, I use these 2 computers to death. I love them. The one on the left, the original, no longer works. I think the computer does, but the battery's totally crapped out, and it won't power up just on a cord. The one on the right still works, although the battery certainly doesn't last very long. The laptop on the right is also powered by the G4 processor. It was the 17-inch PowerBook. We got this, I think, late in 2003 and used the heck out of it. I loved the thing. It had a big screen. I could use it without an external monitor at work. I used it for a few years, and then I passed it actually on to my mother, and she used it for a while. It replaced a desktop for her, and it was great because it had a big screen that she could see, and it didn't take up much space. This thing was retired maybe 4 years ago when I got them iPads.
The computer on the left is a 2012 or 13 model of MacBook Pro with Retina display, the 15-inch. Just recently replaced that with the 2017 model with the touch bar. Still works great. Probably something I should sell or give away. It's still a pretty great computer. My daughter has another one just like it that she uses every day. I realize these aren't Macs, they're iPads, but I just thought I'd make a couple of comments. I've been a big iPad fan since they first come out. In fact, if you do a Google search on O'Grady's Power page, DeWalt, and iPad, you'll see a fairly lengthy review I did of the original iMac back in 2010. On the Sunday after the Saturday that they were first being received by people. So I did one of the first reviews on a live model. These are the three that I use today. The little guy on the left is new. I bought it just a few months ago. It's the Retina display, and I use it to read with at night. It mostly parks itself on my bedside table, and I read Amazon books with it. The one in the middle is the iPad Air. It's not the current generation. It's a few years old, but it works great. I use it in my office down here to control the stereo and to just fiddle with while I'm watching TV. The iPad Pro, the big one on the right, is the 12.9 inch with an attached keyboard. I sometimes use that when I do work, or used to do work, and now do work for the charitable organizations and the boards. It's sometimes handier and simpler to take than a laptop, but most of the time now I just take my laptop. That one just kind of roams around the upstairs of the house and gets used for the occasional web browsing. But I'm a big iPad fan. That's it for today. I appreciate you watching, and if you haven't, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit the subscribe button. Thank you.